bells call to you. Come.
The first ring came just after midnight, soft, distant, like a snowflake landing on glass. Ethan Carter froze, the quiet of his apartment pressing against him, the flickering Christmas lights casting trembling shadows on the walls. He glanced at the phone. No notifications, no missed calls. The ringtone played again, insistent, hollow. He picked it up. Silence. Then a voice. Low, breathless, almost familiar. "Don't answer." The line went dead. Heart hammering, Ethan stared at the screen. The number was his own. His thumb hovered over the keypad as a shiver crawled down his spine. Outside, the snow muffled the usual sounds of the city, but something else moved in the darkness. Shapes shifting behind frosted windows, shadows that didn't belong. Another ring. Louder this time, sharper. He didn't recognize the number, but the voice was unmistakable. Whispers overlapping, each syllable a razor. "It's coming for you, your turn." Ethan stumbled back, the chair clattering to the floor. His apartment, once familiar, seemed smaller, alien. The lights flickered, then all went dark. The phone screen glowed one last time, displaying a message he couldn't comprehend. Last call. A scream echoed, distant, maybe inside his own head. The snow fell silently outside, indifferent, concealing footsteps that weren't his own. Somewhere a door creaked, and then nothing. The snow outside lay thick and untouched, a quiet blanket over the city, muffling the usual hum of life. Ethan Carter wrapped his scarf tighter and peered through the frost-streaked window of his small apartment. Christmas lights blinked across the street, cheerful against the dark night, but tonight they seemed strange, almost mocking. He had spent the evening tidying up, wrapping last-minute gifts, trying to distract himself from the gnawing loneliness that had settled in his chest. He should have been with his family. He should have been with someone. But work had kept him away, and the silence of his apartment had grown familiar. Comfortable even, until the phone rang. Ethan stared at it, blinking, trying to convince himself it was just another late-night wrong number. The line had gone dead the moment he picked up, leaving only the cold static and that whisper. "Don't answer." His thumb hovered over the screen as the first tendrils of fear curled through his spine. He shook his head. "It's nothing. Just a prank." But the phone rang again, faster this time, urgent. His apartment, once a refuge of warmth, felt hollow, unfamiliar. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting unnaturally as the lights flickered. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the receiver. The number flashing across the screen was his own. His stomach twisted. He sank into his chair, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The sound of snow crunching against the glass made him flinch. He could have sworn he saw movement outside. Figures behind frosted windows, indistinct shapes that vanished when he blinked. The city was supposed to be quiet tonight, serene. Not alive like this. A soft knock at the door made him startle. No one came in. Just a shadowy silhouette disappearing down the hallway outside. He pressed himself against the wall, listening. His apartment had never seemed so small, so fragile. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional whisper of wind against the window. He tried to focus on mundane things, the warmth of his mug, the pattern of the carpet, the glow of Christmas lights. But every time he looked at the phone, it seemed to pulse slightly, as if waiting. And then another call. The voice on the other end was distorted, layered with static, but unmistakably close, as if standing in the same room. "It's coming, for you, your turn." Ethan bolted upright, the chair toppling behind him. His pulse thudded in his ears. He wanted to hang up, throw the phone across the room, but some invisible force rooted him to the spot. The call ended abruptly. The silence afterward was heavier, almost suffocating, pressing against his chest with a cold, invisible hand. He tried to tell himself it was a prank, or some glitch. Nothing real. Nothing real. Nothing real. But deep down something told him otherwise. Something told him that tonight, the world had shifted slightly off its axis, and he had been left behind, alone in the tilt. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Time felt wrong, stretched, slippery. He noticed small, uncanny details. The ornaments on his Christmas tree were subtly out of place. A gift he had left on the couch was now on the floor, untouched. The clock on the wall ticked inconsistently, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. He remembered the news stories he had laughed at during lunch breaks. Family finds unexplained calls on deceased relatives' phone, mysterious calls haunt city during holidays. He had never believed them. But as he sat in his apartment, surrounded by quiet and shadows, he realized how wrong he had been. There was no logical explanation for what was happening. A knock at the window drew his gaze. Frosted glass obscured the street, but he swore he saw someone standing there watching. Just one figure, tall and still, backlit by the flickering streetlights. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, when he blinked, it was gone. His phone buzzed again. He didn't want to answer, but curiosity and dread combined into something heavier than fear itself. He picked up. The screen displayed a new message, typed out in a jagged, uneven font, "Last call." Ethan shivered. The word felt alive, crawling across his skin. He dropped the phone, hearing it hit the hardwood with a muted thud. Something in the apartment seemed to shift. Shadows pooled in corners. The lights flickered once more. He whispered to himself, almost pleading, "This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real." Then, from the darkness of the hallway came a faint sound, almost imperceptible. Footsteps, or the creaking of a door. He couldn't tell. His apartment, his sanctuary, had become alien. Each familiar corner now hid something unknown, something patient. The final knock came from the door. Long, deliberate, echoing in the silent apartment. Ethan froze. His chest ached, a mix of fear and disbelief. His mind raced, trying to rationalize, trying to ignore the impossible reality of the phone calls, the shadows, the whispers. But deep down, he knew, whatever had found him tonight was no accident. Whatever waited in the darkness had chosen him. And the night was far from over. The night stretched on, heavy and relentless, as Ethan sat huddled near the window, staring at the pale glow of streetlights reflecting off the snow. He tried to shake off the terror, tried to rationalize it, a prank, a glitch, something explainable. But deep down, he knew he was running out of excuses. Every shadow in the room seemed to move with a life of its own, and the silence between phone rings was more deafening than any sound could be. The first unsettling realization hit him as he noticed small, impossible changes in his apartment. The gifts he had wrapped earlier, perfectly stacked in a corner, were now scattered across the floor, edges bent and torn. The Christmas ornaments on the tree weren't merely moved. They were rearranged, twisted slightly as though someone or something had studied him, mocking his effort. He picked up his phone. No new calls. But the last message, "Last call," burned in his mind like a brand. He scrolled through his call history and froze. His own number, Ethan Carter, was listed repeatedly as the caller. Each entry time-stamped within minutes of real deaths reported on the news. A whisper, almost imperceptible, drifted across the room. "You made the first call." Ethan spun toward the sound, eyes wide. The apartment was empty. His breath came in short, shallow bursts. He wanted to call the police, to demand rationality. But the thought of speaking into a phone, of connecting with the world outside, sent shivers crawling down his spine. What if the calls, what if the curse was listening? Minutes, or hours, passed. Time no longer made sense. The room's lights flickered erratically, casting familiar corners into strange angles. The snow outside thickened, quieting everything, isolating him further. Ethan's mind raced, attempting to piece together the impossible. He recalled a story from years ago, a legend whispered by his grandmother, a series of mysterious deaths every Christmas night, all preceded by a single phone call. The victim's last messages always read the same. Short, fragmented, horrifying. Last call. His grandmother's warning echoed in his memory. Never answer the call. Never. Some things are waiting in the line. He had laughed then, dismissed the story as folklore. Tonight, the laugh had long died on his lips. Another ring shattered the fragile quiet. Ethan's heart surged into his throat. The number was unknown. Hesitation froze him, but the tone itself, was a scream without sound. He answered. A faint, tremulous voice whispered, "Ethan, you can't run." The line cut abruptly. The air in the apartment shifted. Shadows pooled at the corners, thicker than darkness should allow. Ethan noticed the smallest details now. Dust motes suspended unnaturally, the floorboards creaking without weight. Every familiar object felt slightly alien. The apartment itself was changing, bending to an unseen will. He tried to leave the room. The door to the hallway groaned as he turned the knob, but it wouldn't budge. Panicking, he checked the lock. It was normal, locked and unlocked, yet the door refused to move. Something beyond reason had trapped him inside. The second micro-event occurred almost immediately. A chair slid slowly across the floor, leaving deep grooves in the hardwood, as if dragged by invisible hands. Ethan recoiled, throwing his arms up in defense, but it stopped as suddenly as it began. Silence fell again, dense and suffocating, pressing into his chest. He stumbled back toward the phone. Another incoming call. His own number again. This time, the display included a video thumbnail. Trembling, he tapped it. The screen showed him his apartment this very moment, filmed from angles he had no way to access. The camera shifted, showing him cowering, his wide eyes reflected in the lens. A whisper, closer this time, behind his ear. "Your turn." Ethan spun around. Nothing. Only shadows. He sank to the floor, head in hands. Every rational thought clashed with the impossible reality. The apartment was alive, the calls were alive, and he was not alone. Hours, or maybe minutes, blurred into one endless, terrifying stretch. Ethan felt the walls closing in. Every sound outside, sirens, muffled footsteps, snow crunching, echoed unnaturally. He noticed a neighbor through the frosted window, peeking out but remaining distant, cautious. Their eyes met briefly. The neighbor's mouth moved, whispering words Ethan couldn't catch, then vanished as if swallowed by the night. He tried calling someone, anyone, but the moment he dialed, the line went dead. The phone displayed a new notification. "We see you." Fear clawed through him. He remembered another legend, this one more specific, spoken in hushed tones at his grandmother's dinner table. Decades ago, a man received a series of last calls on Christmas Eve, each one predicting a death in his family. Attempts to escape to warn anyone only accelerated the chain. Those who ignored the warnings vanished before dawn. Ethan's blood ran cold. The pieces were fitting together, horrifyingly precise. Every micro-event, the rearranged objects, the impossible video, the whispers, were all part of a pattern. He was the next link. Another ring cut through the silence. Ethan flinched, almost too terrified to breathe. The call came from a number he did not recognize. He answered. This time, it wasn't a voice. It was a series of sounds, faint and distorted. The creak of a chair, the shuffle of feet, the scraping of something metal across wood. It was happening live, inside his own apartment. He froze, listening. The sounds moved closer. Each creak, each shuffle, synchronized with his heartbeat. Ethan's mind screamed at him to flee, but the apartment resisted. The door remained locked. The window was frostbound. Escape was impossible. And then a whisper, perfectly clear this time. "You shouldn't have answered the first one." Ethan screamed, a raw, hollow sound that was swallowed by the heavy walls. The phone slipped from his hands, but the ringing continued, another number now displayed. One he recognized instantly. His own mother's line, disconnected for years. He stared at it, trembling. The legend was real. The last calls were not random. They were connected. Every death, every disappearance, all preceded by a call from someone already lost. And now, by some impossible twist, he had become the sender and the recipient, the observer and the target. The room seemed to pulse around him. The Christmas tree lights blinked once, then went dark. A faint glow emanated from the phone, illuminating his wide, terrified eyes. Ethan realized he was no longer alone. Something, or someone, had been in the apartment all along, unseen, patient, watching. Another micro-event. The ornaments on the tree began to rattle violently, one by one, spinning and clattering to the floor. The sound was deafening in the oppressive silence. Ethan pressed himself against the wall, shaking, unable to move. His mind teetered on the edge of collapse. He remembered the warnings in hushed tones, the stories of neighbors who vanished, the old caretaker who whispered cryptic phrases every Christmas. Once you answer, it begins. No one escapes. Ethan understood now. It wasn't the calls that killed, they were the proof, the reminder, the mark. The killer, or curse, was already inside him, waiting for the final act. Another call. Another number. Another impossible voice, layered and overlapping with static. Ethan. It's coming. Make the last call. He stumbled back, dropping to the floor, curling into a ball. The room warped subtly, walls elongating, shadows stretching toward him, light bending unnaturally. His phone vibrated again, this time in his pocket. He hadn't touched it. The screen displayed a new video. Himself, screaming. Only it wasn't live. It was recorded moments ago, yet his mouth was moving, screaming in perfect synchrony. Paranoia consumed him. Every breath felt heavy, every sound amplified. The city outside had disappeared beneath layers of snow and darkness. He was isolated, trapped, targeted. Every legend, every warning had been true. Every detail, the whispers, the impossible numbers, the shifting apartment, pointed to one inevitable conclusion. The last call was his, and there would be no salvation. The final micro-event before the climax hit with terrifying subtlety. The faint scent of burning filled the room. Not smoke, not fire, but something acrid and chemical. Shadows danced across the walls, coalescing into vague forms. Figures standing silently, watching, waiting. One step forward, then another. They never moved fully, never approached fully. Yet the proximity was undeniable. They were real enough to terrify, too unreal to confront. Ethan pressed his face against his knees, trembling, tears frozen on his cheeks. The phone rang again. One last call. He didn't want to pick it up. He couldn't. And yet, a force beyond comprehension made him reach, fingers shaking, thumb hovering over the answer button. The ringing slowed, lengthened, warped, stretching time. The air around him vibrated with unseen tension. He whispered to himself, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But deep in his core he knew. This was only the beginning. The ringing never stopped. It was everywhere now. In his ears, in the walls, vibrating beneath his feet. Ethan Carter's hands shook as he tried to shield himself, pressing his palms over his ears, but the sound penetrated everything. Each chime, each distorted tone, was a scream that belonged to someone he didn't yet know, someone who had answered the call before him. The apartment had changed completely. Walls bent and twisted, the familiar layout dissolving into something alien. Shadows clung to the corners, thickening, elongating, moving independently of the light. The Christmas tree was alive with motion. Ornaments spinning violently, pine needles scattering like sharp rain, lights flickering with an unnatural rhythm. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps. He stumbled across the warped floorboards, feeling them pulse under his weight, each creak echoing in perfect synchronization with his heartbeat. The phone lay in the center of the room, vibrating continuously, the screen glowing with a distorted message. "Make the last call." A voice, a chorus of whispers, rose from the device. "Ethan, answer. Finish. Don't delay." He collapsed to the floor. The words were commands, threats, pleas, all at once. He tried to resist, to turn away, but something invisible held him in place. The air itself seemed to constrict around his chest, each inhalation sharp, painful. His mind reeled with fragmented memories of the legends, the micro-events, the impossible videos. The truth was undeniable. The curse, whatever it was, had claimed him. And the final act required his participation. Another ring. Louder, closer, emanating not from the phone but from all directions. From the ceiling, the walls, beneath the floorboards. The apartment had become a labyrinth of sound and shadow, a stage for the inevitable. Ethan crawled backward, tripping over overturned chairs, his eyes darting to every corner. A shadow coalesced in the far end of the room. Tall, amorphous, moving impossibly. He wanted to scream, but the air stole his voice. The entity manifested as layers of distorted voices, overlapping and warping, each one familiar yet horrifyingly wrong. It whispered confessions of deaths, names of people Ethan had never met, moments captured from previous victims' last calls. The whispers overlapped with screams that seemed to come from inside his own head. "You're next. It's time. Answer now." He tried to run to the window. Frosted glass blocked the street outside. Snow swirled violently against it, as if the storm itself had become part of the curse. Shadows pooled along the edges of the room, slithering toward him, stretching unnaturally. Ethan's fingers pressed against the glass, leaving smudges, but it offered no escape. A short, sharp whisper broke through the chaos. "You made the first call." Ethan froze. The memory hit him. Earlier, when the first call had come through, he had answered despite the warnings, curiosity defeating caution. That single action had unleashed this. Every micro-event, every shadow, every distorted voice, it had started with that answer. The lights flickered violently, plunging him into darkness for brief moments, then illuminating the room with unnatural clarity. The shadows now had shape, humanoid, faceless, stretching impossibly across walls and floor. One of them stepped forward, then another, until dozens surrounded him, their movements synchronized with the phone's ringing. Ethan's voice broke through a choked whisper. "Stop, stop it, please." A singular, sharp voice answered, cutting through the chorus. "You called first. Now you finish." The phone lifted itself, hovering midair. The screen displayed a live feed. Ethan, screaming, crawling across the floor, shadows closing in, his apartment dissolving into madness. And yet the feed wasn't just showing reality. It was predicting it. Each second, each action, every desperate attempt to escape was already captured. The last call had to be made. Ethan clawed at the phone, trying to crush it. The entity's whispers intensified. "No, it won't end. Until you answer." Another micro-event. Objects in the apartment shattered in perfect rhythm. Glass exploding, chairs toppling, ornaments breaking. The sound was deafening, yet the ringing persisted. The shadows now moved with purpose, advancing. One reached for him, its form solidifying, though no eyes or face could be discerned. Its hand brushed against his shoulder. Cold, solid, unrelenting. Ethan screamed, flailing, stumbling back. The walls bent further, the ceiling lowering as if compressing him into the floor. Time itself seemed to distort. Seconds stretched into eternity. The ringing became a physical force, vibrating through his skull. He looked at the phone. The message had changed. "Make the last call or it ends with you." His fingers trembled. 1,000 voices screamed from the device. Past victims, distorted by static and decay, overlapping in a cacophony that nearly broke his mind. Among them, he recognized one, the faint whisper of his grandmother's voice from years ago. "Never answer." Desperation overcame hesitation. Ethan lifted the phone to his ear. Silence. The ringing stopped. A single distorted whisper hissed. "Yes. Finally." The shadows recoiled, then surged again. The walls pulsed, then shattered into fragments of light and darkness. The apartment no longer felt real. The air itself was thick, pressing into his lungs, suffocating. He felt himself being dragged, drawn toward the phone as though gravity had reversed. He tried to resist. "No, I won't," he shouted, but his words were swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed the whispers. The phone vibrated violently, the screen now showing not him, but the faces of the previous victims, frozen in their final moments. Their mouths moved, whispering the same words in unison. "Last call, last call, last call." Ethan's hands shook uncontrollably. The first shadow reached him fully, pressing against his chest. The cold burned, ice spreading through his veins, paralyzing him. Other shadows pressed in, their weight impossible, their forms stretching endlessly. The ringing returned, louder, sharper, penetrating deeper into his skull. A final, piercing voice cut through everything, singular, commanding. "Answer, Ethan, or be erased." The phone slipped from his fingers, hovering midair, vibrating. Ethan's mind fractured, every thought splintering. He realized he had no choice. No escape. The curse, the entity, was inescapable. With trembling hands, he lifted the phone once more. The screen displayed one number. His own. The camera feed showed him screaming, surrounded by shadows, trapped in the warped apartment. His lips moved, barely audible. I answer. A scream, deafening and unnatural, echoed from the device. The shadows surged, surrounding him completely. The apartment dissolved into darkness, leaving only Ethan, the ringing phone, and a silence so deep it pressed against the mind itself. And then nothing. The ringing stopped. The shadows vanished. Ethan Carter was gone. The apartment remained, empty, silent. Snow fell outside, muffling all sound. The lights flickered once, then returned to normal. Only the phone remained, glowing softly on the floor. Its screen displayed a single message. Next year, someone else. The apartment was silent. The air hung heavy, untouched, as if the events of the night had been nothing but a fevered dream. The snow outside fell thickly, muffling all sound and blanketing the streets in frozen stillness. Inside, the Christmas lights blinked weakly, casting trembling shadows over the upturned furniture, broken ornaments, and scattered wrapping paper. The air smelled faintly of ozone, of cold, metallic anticipation, a lingering residue of what had transpired. No one moved. No one called. No one answered. The neighbors would wake in the morning to a quiet street, the snow pristine, the apartment unremarkable. They would find no trace of struggle, no signs of life beyond what had always existed. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft glow of a phone on the floor betrayed that something extraordinary and terrible had occurred. The phone still pulsed gently, vibrating as if breathing. Its screen displayed a single stark message. Next year, someone else. No further calls came. No ringing, no static, no whispers. The curse, if it could be called that, had moved on, leaving a vacuum of silence in its wake. And yet the silence itself carried weight, a quiet that pressed into the chest, heavy with unseen presence. Across the city, other apartments, homes, and streets were untouched, but somewhere, subtly, imperceptibly, a shift had occurred. The stories that had once seemed like folklore, the news reports, the whispered warnings, the tales passed through generations, would continue. New victims would emerge, drawn by the same unseen force that had claimed Ethan Carter. His disappearance would remain a mystery, catalogued perhaps in a police report, dismissed as another tragic anomaly. Inside the apartment, the broken ornaments glimmered weakly in the flickering lights, their shards catching the reflections of a Christmas tree that seemed to breathe softly in the cold air. Ethan's chair lay on its side, the phone at its center. Dust had settled in the corners where shadows had pooled, but the residue of fear lingered, palpable and almost sentient. A neighbor, Mr. Clark, who lived across the hall, would later remark that he had sensed something unusual that night. A faint vibration in the floor, almost like footsteps, or perhaps just the wind. The air had been thick, oppressive, carrying a quiet unease he couldn't name. But when he knocked on Ethan's door the next morning, there was no answer. The apartment was empty, pristine. A few gifts still lay on the couch, perfectly wrapped as though untouched by human hands. Mr. Clark shrugged it off. Perhaps Ethan had gone home to his family. Perhaps it was nothing. The news reported a missing person. Ethan Carter. No foul play suspected. No witnesses. A polite notice in the small-town section, read and forgotten by most. Yet for those attuned to the whispers, the stories passed quietly over fireplaces, in hushed tones at holiday dinners. Another thread had been woven into the tapestry of legend. The curse, the entity, the last calls. They were alive, moving silently from one hand to the next, one number to the next, until the night came again. And the phone. It remained, glowing faintly on the floor. One could imagine someone stumbling upon it weeks later, months later. Curious, they would lift it. Perhaps test the power, or simply see if it still worked. And if they did, if they dared to answer, the shadows would stir once more. The whispers would return. The ringing would echo through the walls and the streets, and the cycle would continue. Inside the apartment, the smallest signs of life remained. Tiny movements in the shadows, imperceptible shifts of furniture, a chair slightly off-center. These were echoes, remnants of what had happened. And the phone, central to it all, pulsed with a quiet, persistent rhythm. It waited, patient, indifferent, eternal. Far from the apartment, Ethan Carter's essence, or whatever had been left behind, was gone. Not dead, not alive, but displaced. Somewhere, tethered to the invisible lines of the curse, he existed as a shadow of memory, a fragment of consciousness that could hear the ringing, but could not respond. Time no longer applied. Space no longer applied. He was trapped in a liminal state between life and whatever lay beyond. For those left behind, the night remained peaceful. Streets glistened under snow, houses hummed with warmth, children's laughter echoed faintly from distant homes. But for anyone listening closely, anyone sensitive to the subtleties of the world, the silence carried meaning. It was a quiet that spoke of things beyond comprehension, a presence that observed, calculated, and waited. A final call would come again. It always did. In the apartment, the broken ornaments glimmered one last time as the lights flickered. One shard of glass reflected the soft glow of the phone, a perfect miniature of the room, but distorted, twisted. It was an image of what had been, a frozen echo of terror, captured and unchanging. Shadows pooled in the corners, but they no longer moved actively. They waited, patient, calm, dormant. A storm had passed, leaving a fragile peace, but nothing had truly ended. The first morning of Christmas arrived with soft light, muted by thick clouds. The neighbors left for church, for family, for routines that ignored the night's horrors. No one noticed the apartment, except perhaps in passing. The door was closed, the lights off, the snow untouched. Only the faint hum of the phone remained, and if one leaned closely, one might hear the tiniest vibration, a whisper, a warning. Next year, someone else. And in that quiet, the world carried on. Children laughed. Cars passed. Snow fell. But somewhere, in the hidden lines between reality and impossibility, the curse lingered. It would return. It would call again. And when it did, it would claim the next unwitting victim. Ethan Carter was gone, but his disappearance was not a singular tragedy. It was the continuation of a story older than memory, older than the city itself. A story that would whisper its warnings again and again. It would persist, invisible, relentless, unstoppable. The apartment stood as a monument to what had happened, a frozen testament to fear made real. And the phone, softly glowing, patiently waiting, remained its herald. The snow outside continued to fall. Each flake was silent, perfect, indifferent. The world appeared calm, but the night had left its mark. A lingering unease that could not be named, a shadow that stretched beyond the walls of one apartment. And perhaps, somewhere, Ethan Carter could hear the faintest echoes of the last call, drifting endlessly into the void, waiting for the next hand to pick up. The final chill in the air was subtle, almost imperceptible. The lights flickered once, weakly, as if a breath had passed over the room. Then the apartment returned to stillness. The phone remained, softly pulsing in quiet anticipation. The world continued, but for those who understood, the warning was clear. Some calls are never truly finished. Some voices never stop. Some horrors, once awakened, are eternal. And somewhere, in the invisible lines between reality and nightmare, the whispers continued. Next year, someone else.